It was a railway train with a corridor and compartments. Not the sort of thing you see these days, except in films. But this was just the beginning of the Second World War. And my father, who was called up, was going off to be a soldier, was in one of these compartments. It was a troop train, I suppose. And he told the story that he was in this compartment and there were several other young recruits. And they stopped at a station. And into the compartment came a giant of a man. Huge, well-built, looked like a bruiser, if you know what I mean. And he indicated to one of the young recruits that he wanted his seat, and so the guy just moved. He then sat down and glared around the occupants of the compartment and said, just to get something straight, I don't like, he used a word I wouldn't repeat, but basically black people. I don't like, he used a word I wouldn't use, Irish people. I don't like Catholics. Is that all right with everybody? He said. And my father said that most people just kind of kept their heads down and said nothing. But my dad, being my dad, said, well, I think there might be a problem. You see, I'm a Catholic. Now, I suppose my father partly told a story reminding us of that racism and prejudice that was endemic in those days. I mean, and we're all aware this still exists now. It's not to say that my father wasn't at all racist. He was a child of his age, and he'd come out with remarks that we as children would be astonished at and would pick him up on. But at the same time, the way he'd been brought up, both in terms of family life and his own faith, it was very much the idea that everybody in one way or another can be in a minority. And what you have to do is treat people with respect. You don't treat them badly because of the color of their skin or what kind of country they come from, what kind of people they are, what kind of beliefs they have, whatever that might be. You don't treat people badly in that way. It's just not right. Now, he said, actually, that this big bruiser of a man, the moment my father said that there would be a problem, that he was a Catholic, he said it was a kind of collapse of stout party. The man suddenly became all smiles and said, oh, well, I don't mean you. It'll be all right, I'm sure. A typical bully, if you like. I think also my father told a story because, well, he told it to me and my two older brothers. And I think he was saying, you should stand up for what you believe in. Now, reflecting on that over the years, I recognize that he wasn't really directing it at Francis and Henry, my two older brothers. They were kind of in-your-face people, if you know what I mean. Nobody would bully them. They would let them know. They would stand up to anyone. It was me he was telling the story to. He thought I was far too quiet and reserved, shy, understated. Now, I go into all of this because in our second reading, we have this line. In your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect. There's something about the way we're supposed to stand up for our faith, for what we believe in. It's not about getting into arguments or fights. It's not about aggression or belligerence. But it's about being ready to step up and in a calm, quiet way say, well, this is what I hold to be true. And to respect others, whatever their views may be. We're all called to do that. I think this is really interesting. This second reading, normally we hear from St. Paul in the epistle, but this time it's from the first letter of St. Peter. Now, it's interesting that scholars argue, did St. Peter really write this passage? You see, again, it's not something I would be qualified to be able to really judge. I know a bit of Greek, but apparently the style of Greek is written by somebody very, very well educated. This is written by a person who was trained in Greek from an early age and writes beautifully, apparently. You wouldn't expect a fisherman from Galilee to write that kind of Greek. And also in the whole of the letter, there are various ideas going on in it that really wouldn't be in the kind of mental world of somebody from that part of the land of Israel. So people question, they say, is it really St. Peter that's writing this? Is it not somebody else? And they're assuming the title, the name of Peter. It's interesting, Pope Benedict spoke about this. He's not the only one to have observed this truth, that in the letter itself, it talks about how it's from Peter. He says, it's from me, Peter. But he says, delivered to you, handed over to you by Silvanus. And the speculation is that Pope Benedict goes into is it that St. Peter knew this man, Silvanus, in the city of Rome, and this was an educated convert to Christianity, and he asks Silvanus to write down his thoughts in a letter, to do it for him. More even than a secretary, a person who collects the thoughts together and says, is this what you want me to say? And Peter then has this letter distributed. Obviously we don't know, we cannot know. But certainly that's what Pope Benedict speculated on. Now, I think the interesting thing about that is, it's something else about being reasonable and putting into the right kind of language what's important to us. Perhaps Peter knew he didn't have the words. Perhaps Peter knew he couldn't put it as clearly as this friend Silvanus could. And he asks him to shape what he says. It's about trying to put across our faith in such a way that people will listen, hear, speak in ways that make sense to them. That's what we're called to do. Always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. That's what we're all called to do. To treat others with respect and do our best to explain in words and ways that others will find understandable and acceptable.